the thing about catalytic investments, because once that catalyst has been provided, in many cases the private sector takes it forward. Other reflections on that question? Yannick, I see you wanted to say something, and I also want to invite both Ashish and Martin.
Well, thanks, Rolf. I mean, I think if you look at one of the bottlenecks today, it's about access, right? And in order to make fortified staple accessible to the largest number and to expand the reach, we need to ensure that we are working closely with local millers, local traders as well. And in order to really convince them to embrace food fortification, I think we need to make sure that fortification is a no-brainer for them. Meaning they are our customers, they are our partners. And if you look at quality control, for instance, very often they have to send a sample of fortified flour from Africa to Europe or to the US to get analyzed because there is no local analytical capabilities. It costs money, takes time, so I think all this needs to change somehow. Can we look into investing into developing, to strengthening the local quality control system, for instance, maybe even at regional level? That will really help to get more local players on board and then to be able to reach much further, I would say.
Thank you. Ashish or Martin?
Yeah, hi. So from the way I see it, I would say that in a developing market like Nigeria, I'm taking example of Nigeria, it's very difficult to for a manufacturer, to invest in technology, etc. Because a market like this, when the basic things are not really available, nobody will give you any, upgrade to a higher, more fortified food. So you can do whatever you can do at a very basic level, and unfortunately you can't go beyond that. So that's like one disenabler, I would say, which comes from an inherent, the way the market is. To me, I would segment this in three different, axes. One, of course, is getting the right infrastructure, which at least from our side, we made a humble beginning with the help of TechnoServe, and we've been able to, get a premix dedicated facility. So getting the infrastructure is very critical as to how would you provide the benefit. The second part is technology, which I think a lot of stuff can be done in terms of sharing of data, automation, precision, because in a market like Africa, these things really are really important. Each batch can be different because the predictability part needs to be governed by technology. So getting a good technology is very critical. Sharing of information and data is very critical. And the last and the most important pillar is communication. Investing in communication, investing in education. When you go down to bakers, you work with the bakers and work with them very in a tirelessly, to work and educate them the benefits of fortification. And bread being the cheapest carbohydrate option available in the country, you can imagine the kind of impact the bakeries can have on the larger set of people. While it is not very, how would I say, doesn't come very naturally to them, because when everybody's trying to fight for the basic food, one does not talk about the next level of order of needs, which is like how good my food is. So I think that needs to be pushed by us, as we have, I would say, the means to do it. And I think education is really the key. The least that what we can do from my side is educate people.
Thank you. Any additional comments, Martin?
Yes. I just want to say that I kind of subscribe to the comments from Ashish and also from Yannick and from Sean. But I just want to add one thing. In the countries that the Malabo panel has shown some real success, some real progress, policy plays a very important role, whether for large scale, fortification, or for things like biofortification. The policy, and when I talk of policy, often they are silent, but I'm talking of the holistic policy that is supported by both both ministries, health and education. And that policy creates incentives, for what Ashish was talking about. If you accept to invest in an equipment, technologies to fortify food, the government should be able to offset some of my investments, either as tax holidays, policy incentives that actually, makes it, attractive. And also down the chain, if you're a baker, if you are, if you use fortified, in flour, there should be something that actually helps you, still make profit and still remain in business. But the last thing I want to say about the policy, and especially on large-scale fortification, governments have to communicate, and Ashish mentioned this. So communication is probably the most important thing. It has to be clear. The audience has to be, well defined, and the message has to be very well defined, and then it has to be repeated. Otherwise, people just feel that, oh no, this thing, it is just a waste of time and money. It's not. It's not. The impact, the effect of malnutrition is real. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, in the closing moments of this session, I'm going to ask each of the speakers if they could offer, from their perspective, the one priority that they think would be make fortification a game changer in a country. What would that priority or investment, either in financial or technical support, be? I know there are many, but I'm going to ask you to each select which you think would be the key to making a major move forward. And I'll ask maybe if in the order of presenters. Martin, would you be able to provide your one priority? Martin, you might be on mute.
I'm trying to unmute myself. I'm sorry. Yeah, for me, if you're going to tell me one priority, if you just take one priority, I'll probably say communication. Very clear and strong communication about the importance of the diversified food basket, importance of fortification, importance of breastfeeding, importance of food safety, communication. We should really invest in it. It's been overlooked for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean?
It's the political leadership. And I think it goes back to also what Martin was saying. I mean, so much of it are the right policies in place. Is the political will to implement those policies. And, from a donor's perspective, there's nothing we can do to substitute for lack of political leadership. We work in partnership with our partner governments, and that is indispensable.
Okay, Ashish.
Yeah, I think, as I was saying, yeah, it's important that education is the key. Education really sets people free. So I think the least which we can do is, first of all, educate people, in terms of how important is fortification. And then everything else can be layered on top of it. I think that's a very easy thing to do. It's not very expensive if one does not want to do it in a large scale. But whatever you want to do, make an impact.
Okay, and Yannick, we'll finish with you.
Sure, thanks, Wolf. I would have said education as well, but it's been taken already. So I would say collaboration. And I mean, it's a bit of an easy word, obviously, but it's really by having very strong public-private collaboration that we will be able to reach as many people as possible. So.
Well, thank you, and I'm going to reserve the right for just a couple of comments. I recall Sean Baker making a comment, not in this session, but previously, saying that malnutrition and hunger are both markers and makers of poverty. And on the flip side of that, ending hunger and malnutrition, including micronutrient malnutrition, is a marker and a maker of a more productive and prosperous future. And I think that's what has brought us all together to look at one important intervention among a mix that we've talked about. And the way I view things is there are two ways of taking things to scale. One is through the private sector. The other is through the public sector. And I think we've heard that fortification is clear and centered in the private sector, but the investments and the risks and the costs need to be offset by catalytic investments and by political leadership that enables that to happen. There are trade-offs, there are costs. There are costs to action, there are costs to inaction. And I think we need to take stock of those because in many cases, the cost of inaction gets paid by those who are least able to pay the costs, and that is those who are already marginalized and deficient. So we have examples of public health successes that we've seen throughout this conference, where there have been measurable, tangible public health benefits. And I just want to thank the panel for sharing their thoughts on the technical and financial commitment to food fortification, and thank the organizers for allowing this session to take place. And I hand back 2 minutes from our session back to the overall organizers. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for this brilliant session on the commitment of technical and financial partners. And also thank you very much for the nice summary of the session. We are, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, we are at the end of the 2 days consultations. And I will not try to summarize the consultations. The moderators of sessions have done that better than I could have done. And I am also aware that there is a team of rapporteurs who is working behind the scenes to put together the recommendations and the proceedings of these consultations. But before we close, I would like to invite Dr. Hamid Noor to present some quick recommendations that they have been able to capture, and more importantly, a communique. As we meet in the high-level consultation such as this one, it is important that when we leave, we agree on 2 or 3 key things that we want to take away as commitment, high-level commitment from these high-level consultations. So Dr. Hamid will present the recommendation and this communicate to us in form of the conclusion of this meeting. Dr. Hamid is the director of the WFP African Union Global Office and representative to the African Union and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Before he assumed his duty here in Addis, he was a representative and the country director of WFP in Sudan, in India, and before he joined the WFP, he worked with the African Union. So, Dr. Noor, you have the floor at this point. But before you take the floor, Dr. Noor, with your permission, I have Mrs. Simon, who seems to have something very important to share with us. And I want exceptionally to give her the floor because she really wants to take the floor to say something. Mrs. Simon?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Alors, tout ce que nous avons pu entendre depuis hier, je crois que tout cela a suscité en nous beaucoup de réflexions. Et je voudrais souligner le fait que durant l'année 2020, vous savez bien que les entreprises ont eu des difficultés particulières et les projets qui devaient être financés n'ont pas pu le faire. quelles dispositions aujourd'hui pour que ces entreprises puissent reprendre un élan, aller à l'échelle? Parce que le problème de la crise de malnutrition s'est aggravé et c'est devenu au niveau de nos pays de la sous-région. Et il est important que des activités assez solides, qui ont déjà fait leurs preuves, puissent être soutenues pour aller à l'échelle et permettre à la population qui n'a pas beaucoup d'argent, parce que le pouvoir d'achat est vraiment détruit, que les gens puissent eux aussi aller à cette alimentation pour leur survie. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Simone. Les différents panélistes qui sont ici et qui peuvent répondre à cette question, et je vais prier qu'ils puissent vous donner des réponses dans la boîte. Essayez de regarder dans la boîte à messages, puisqu'il y a plusieurs panélistes et cette question ne s'adresse pas à un seul. Donc, on va partager des idées sur ce qu'il faut faire pour que les entreprises qui ont souffert de la pandémie puissent reprendre à l'échelle. Donc, chers panélistes, veuillez partager avec nous des propositions, des suggestions pour que cette entreprise puisse reprendre. Merci beaucoup, madame. So with this, I want to call on Dr. Hamid for the conclusions and recommendations of this consultation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simplice Nwala. And I hope you can hear me clearly, please.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Dr. Nwala, I have half an hour, and I was going to take the extra 2 minutes from my predecessor, but it seems as if we are at the close and we need to try and see how we can wrap up quickly. I will try and do this. According to Dr. Ralph Klein, he said that the last is always the best. I'm not necessarily sure that this is exactly the case, but it's always the most difficult, especially when you are, I'm trying to wrap up things in terms of conclusions. Please, can we keep this slide off for now? This will not be the first slide which I will have. I'll have the other PowerPoints first. So this can just be off and I'll just be talking initially, okay? It's a bit overwhelming really to put conclusions in place and recommendations because there has been such a high level of participation and activity going on over the last 2 days. And the presentations have been so in-depth, really, that almost every single presentation, and we've had about 33, 34, has got recommendations that we can pull out from there. There's a diverse level of participants, as we can see, from private sector to government to NGOs, civil society, and because the meeting also is virtual, it makes it difficult because we have to give feedback in real time as well. So I'm just going to say that we'll try and present what we have, and it's not just myself. We do have a plenary, we do have a team consisting of rapporteurs who are members from the African Union Commission itself, from West African Health Organization, from WFP, from headquarters, from region, and from myself as well. So there's a team that have been trying to extract what has been going on throughout the whole 2 days of the conference. It's very clear. We are singing from the same hymn book. We are singing the same song. Different players in different areas, but we need to see now, how do we harmonize that song now in an orchestra where everybody is playing different instruments to put things forward in a positive way. I would like to refer to the objective of the conference, which is present in your conference notes. And in that, there was an overall objective of this consultation, which was to promote discussions and sharing of experiences and best practices among the different countries and actors involved in food fortification at the global, regional, and national levels in order to accelerate the fight against malnutrition in all its forms in Africa. Please keep that in the back of your mind because we have to see whether we have answered that question in the end. I'm not going to go through all the sessions. It was a wide variety. We looked at opening sessions where there was political involvement and commitments. There was also looking at things like the focus on micronutrient deficiencies, anemia, the state of food fortification in Africa, in the whole 3 sessions of that. And of course, we've wound up today now with the last session now, which has to do with financing institutions and technical institutions. In terms of looking at these recommendations and how to put them forward, there is a need for us to be as simple as possible. because there are so many recommendations. Okay, because we have a terrible echo. Can technology please take care of that? Thank you. So we need to be as simple and practical as possible in terms of how we make these recommendations. However, there still needs to be a lot of work that's going to be done, because we've had to extract from the chat boxes, from the question and answer boxes, from emails, and even WhatsApp messages that we've been getting in order to try and see how we can come up with some concrete recommendations. Some of the points that we had to ponder, or considerations that we had to make, and in no particular order, were, for example, leadership and oversight. How do we push this forward? Who is going to lead us in this quest? How do we look at an institution or an entity that can help to support us in implementation of fortification? How do we address the various forms of fortification? Artificial, where you do addition, or synthetic, and biofortification, which play a very, very important role. Messages including things like what types of feedstuff are being fortified, what is locally available, what kind of fortificants are being used, what kind of technology is being used. All these things are things that we considered in terms of looking at how we can make recommendations. We also had to consider the fact that fortification in itself is not the silver bullet, as was said by some presenters. It is in addition to other tools such as supplementation and dietary diversification. We also looked at how do we get the maximum impact? Where do we target our efforts in fortification in Africa as we move forward? And looking at really some of the projects that are already existing and the lessons that we've learned, such as through school feeding programs, which are already existing on the continent, and the first 1,000 days of life, and other social protection platforms, which are already ongoing in the African continent in different countries. And we had a lot of discussion from different countries on what they have been doing. Private sector role, huge, huge consideration in terms of making a recommendation. The role of the private sector. The role of private sector in Africa, homegrown. We just listened to GSM, we just listened to OLAM, we know Harvest Plus, all these are already here in Africa. And we, of course, always want to look for homegrown African solutions to African problems, of which fortification is one. We are also looking at, in terms of consideration, the voices that need to be heard, the vulnerable groups in emergency and non-emergency situations, women and children in particular, and how we can target making recommendations or suggestions that can really help us to deliver to them in a more appropriate way. Recommendations regarding advocacy and partnership came up time and time again, and how we can piggyback on those partnerships in terms of looking at events or upcoming events that can help us now to advocate at a much higher and wider level. Recommendations that also looking at sharing platforms for information and data. We also looked at national strategies for fortification and continental strategies. We also looked at a clear recommendation that was recommended at the very beginning for an action plan. Can we have an action plan? Who does it? Where? When? How is it going to be generated? Other things that we considered were looking at the importance of partners. How do we look at recommendations that can include partners, academia and others, and the role of South-South collaboration, technical collaboration. We heard from India, from Brazil, we heard from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others. How do we leverage this so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel? We looked at recommendations that look at fortification of funding, because everything needs to be, funding of fortification. Everything needs to be funded. How do we increase budgets and allocation of budgets towards this big, game-changing thing called fortification? Knowing that homegrown budgets are very important. How much are countries putting towards it themselves? And even looking at the international financial institutions, and looking especially at the African Development Bank that we see as a homegrown funding institution, but also the World Bank and others, and the role that they are going to play. Recognizing that a return on investment is what we are looking for, a return on investment. And fortification has shown clearly by the Copenhagen Consensus and other many examples that we've seen throughout the last 2 days that the return on investment is not just monetary return, but health returns, GDP impact returns, development returns is so fantastic. So I won't go into more details on this, but just to say that these are all the factors that we try to look at as the rapporteurs to try and see how we can come up now with recommendations. Can I please have the first set of slides, please, showing the recommendation areas. So we feel that there needs to be a very good preamble, looking at making the case for fortification now. Fortification in Africa is now, and it needs to be done quickly, it needs to be done all-inclusively and holistically. So making the case is very important. We try to look at all these various considerations I'm talking about, and we managed to group them into 6, what I will call recommendation thematic areas. The first one is looking at leadership and who takes the role, the responsibility, the ownership, the oversight. And this we know has been indirectly through the African Union and the regional economic communities, but also member states being champions and other players like the private sector and others and civil society being champions in that. So a recommendation around endorsing, supporting, and and having that accountability between the African Union and member states and pushing for fortification is very important. And for us to be able to provide evidence base for them, the political elite, to push with the clear bullets that they need to push this forward, involving ministries of finance and things like that, and decision-making and accountability. The second area that we are looking at is the African Union itself is a diplomatic, it's a policy organ. In terms of implementation, there needs to be an implementation body, a supportive facility that needs to take this forward. Looking at things like roadmaps, strategic plans, a one-stop shop for data, for information, for the list of partners, where they are, what they're doing. So a recommendation area looking at creating a supportive facility to be hosted by SERFAM. And I bring this out because this was what was said at the opening, that SERFAM is already a specialized a specialized center of excellence for food and nutritional security on the African continent. So the offer was made by the Ivorian government that since it's already there, it needs now to be adopted now by the African Union through those various mechanisms as a specialized technical organ. How can we recommend that this now should be fast-tracked? The third area was looking at where do we now concentrate our efforts in terms of being smart, not reinventing the wheel, and looking at innovative platforms. So looking at the areas that we can look around that and pushing this forward, and looking at, of course, school feeding and the first 1,000 needs. The next slide, please. The fourth area is looking at creating an enabling environment, okay, for policy, legal environment, okay, and financial environment for fortification efforts to thrive. Here we're looking at things like looking at regulatory body, because you can have a policy organ, the African Union, you can have the implementers at the ground level, at state level, but in between, having the standards for fortification, the quality assurance, the quality control, the feedback, and looking at institutions which are already present, either drug agencies or food agencies. An example, of course, is the India FSSAI, NDLA, Nigeria. How do we look at this? A recommendation regarding trying to see how we can capture that very clearly so that we can push this forward. The fifth area is a recommendation that's going to come up on developing a clear action plan, a plan of action. Now, this is going to start with the proceedings or the outcome of this meeting, of this conference. Having a blueprint, what needs to go into it, and this needs to be comprehensive and have a funding strategy also attached to it. The last but not the least area that we're going to have a recommendation on, strong recommendation, is the area of partnerships, advocacy, okay? And what we can do to try to advocate more, stronger, using existing platforms and upcoming events. We know about the African Union Heads of State Summit that comes up every year in February. We know about next year being the theme of nutrition. We know about the African School Feeding Day that's coming up. We know there are so many different platforms. How do we position ourselves and package the information and target this and the recommendation along those lines? So, these, we're saying we need to have input from you in terms of helping us to craft the appropriate wording to these 6 areas that cover the gamut of exactly what we've been doing for the last 2 days. Please, can I go to the next slide? This is looking at a communique. We thought that at least before we leave today, we have to come up now with a communique, which is going to represent or capture the essence of what we've been doing for the last 2 days. And this communique also has embedded in it some of the elements of the recommendations that I've just said to you. So I'll actually just read through it. We, the participants of the high-level consultation on food fortification, representatives from African countries, the African Union Commission, African regional organizations, UN organizations, development partners, civil society organizations, international financial institutions, the private sector, academia, as well as distinguished invitees, have deliberated during the last 2 days. In this deliberation, we have come up with the following. In alignment with the agreement of all nations to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, including to end all forms of malnutrition by 2030, the World Health Assembly target of a 50% reduction in anemia in women of reproductive age by 2025, Aspiration 1 of the African Union Agenda 2063, and in spirit of the African Union's upcoming Year of Nutrition 2022, reaffirming our commitment, this is our commitment, us now here over the last 2 days, towards advancing fortification in Africa. Deeply concerned about the persisting malnutrition situation in Africa, where 51% of women of reproductive age and 69% of the children aged between 6 to 59 months in Western Africa are anemic, as well as slow progress of many countries in the African sub-region in meeting the targets for anemia in women of reproductive age. Recognizing the game-changing benefits of food fortification as a time-tested and cost-effective strategy to address micronutrient deficiencies with ability to piggyback on existing distribution channels and initiatives and the potential to reach large numbers of people and to improve nutrition without requiring significant behavioral change. Commending the progress made so far, where are we? You've commended the progress made so far on the continent, including efforts to scale up biofortification, that came out very clearly. The 27 countries that have mandates to fortify wheat flour, and many countries that fortify cooking oil and salt as part of their comprehensive nutrition strategy, as well as the slow decline in anemia, cognizant that food fortification, including biofortification, is one approach to addressing micronutrient deficiencies, complementary to supplementation and promotion of dietary diversity. Acknowledging the capacity of food fortification efforts to strengthen broader food systems and the importance of functioning food systems to support fortification implementation, realizing the need for greater partnerships and synergies to augment political commitment such that African Union member states take urgent and concrete actions. And finally, optimistic about the rich human and natural resources on the African continent, which can support the scale-up of food fortification. Please push down on the slide. This is where we have the essence now of our recommendations, which we are yet to fully formulate. We call upon the African Union to formally spearhead and oversee efforts to scale up food fortification in Africa, in collaboration with member states, and in line with already existing continental policies, strategies, and initiatives, and for member state governments, institutions, development partners, and private sector to step forward as champions of food fortification efforts in Africa. 2, we welcome the proposal to elevate to elevate the Regional Center of Excellence Against Hunger and Malnutrition, CERFA, to the status of an African Union specialized agency on food and nutrition security, as per the request of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire to the African Union, in order to facilitate regional harmonization of policies, legal framework and mechanisms on food fortification, and to promote knowledge exchange platforms and networks to foster the dissemination and replication of good practices within the continent, and call on the African Union to fast track this process. 3, call on African Union member states and all partners in their various capacities and mandates to prioritize actions and investments to where food fortification has the greatest potential to impact nutrition through the life cycle. Particular attention in school feeding and the critical window of the first 1,000 days of life. Number 4, we request member states to create an enabling policy, legal and financial environment for fortification efforts to thrive, including investing in capacity building of local producers so that fortification efforts foster rural transformation and stimulating the front runners of good practices in the private sector. 5, we call on SURFAM, in collaboration with partners, for SURFAM cannot do this alone, to lead the development of a clear action plan with roles, responsibilities, accountability, timelines, and a funding strategy by the end of 2021. This action plan should ensure that all partners drive the fortification agenda forward in a synergistic and a sustainable way. And last but not the least, number 6, we urge for the intensification of advocacy, partnership, and knowledge sharing at the global, continental, regional, and national level to accelerate food fortification, improve data collection and analysis, and sensitize stakeholders to the benefits of food fortification. This should take advantage of upcoming platforms and events such as the African Union's Heads of State Summit and the Year of Nutrition for 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the chat box is going to be open for you to give feedback on the communique. I would like to also say that the proceedings of the report of this 2 days, we hope and anticipate that within 1 month it will be ready, plus or minus, plus 2 weeks maximum, on top of that 1 month for translation into the various languages, as French in particular. I now bring us to the very final part, which is the expected outcomes of this 2 days. These are bulleted here. 1 was increased knowledge of major food fortification strategies and initiatives. Increase the knowledge. That has been done. 2, knowledge, good practices, and lessons learned are promoted. That has been done. 3, recommendations and actions made to governments, regional institutions, development partners in the private sector, and other stakeholders. We have made the bones, the thematic areas now for the recommendations, and we have gone ahead now to produce a communique to that effect. 4, an action plan on the next steps for food fortification. So we have ticked that box as well. And the very last is establishment of a network for fortification experts in Africa is initiated, which we feel that under the action plan, this will be done. This has not been easy. As you see, they'll be making some corrections also in real time. We still need to have your support from the chat box and even after this for wording of the recommendations. This has been a tremendous opportunity, and I would like to thank my team, and I would like to thank the organizers. The deliberations have been great, and I really see this, we see this as the beginning of a new day for fortification and ending micronutrient deficiencies and malnutrition in Africa. Thank you very much, Chief Moderator. I hand the reins back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amit, for this brilliant presentation on the recommendation, the conclusion, the recommendation, and the communique. A quick one that comes from the chat is that we should include the regional economic communities in the call for action. I think this we should explicitly mention, although it was somehow the case, but not explicitly mentioned. So we need to mention that, and this is the first comment that I'm receiving. So thank you very much, Dr. Amit, for this very, very brilliant presentation. I want to see whether I have some quick reactions from the floor on the recommendations. As pointed out by Dr. Amit, the recommendation will be detailed in the proceedings of the meeting. The communique, the draft communique has been shared with you for your input, and I kindly invite you to do so as soon as possible so that we can have input. Can you please close your mic? Dr. Patricia? Dr. Patricia, can you close your mic?
Deuxièmement, un outil de bien. C'est-à-dire que la Côte d'Ivoire va remettre, c'est déjà en cours, va remettre son qualité. Parce que c'est un outil de gouvernance. Et tout le long, on a dit c'est les pays. Et ils font des recommandations à l'endroit.
Dr. Patricia, can you please put off your mic, put it on mute, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Patricia. So I was saying we have shared with you the draft communique, and we really want to see whether there are some quick reactions. Dr. Patricia, do you want to react on the communique and the recommendations? If that is the case, please take the floor. Okay, so I think it's a technical problem. So before I call on the acting director of SEFAM to say some closing words, I want to share with you some of the key, what I would call key figures from this consultation. And I would like the technicians to share the screen with me and a quick analysis on the participation to these consultations. So we will start with the first slide. We have a lot of speakers coming to this meeting who have shared with us, and you could see on this map of the world how where the speakers come from. You will see a very good representations from the continent, but also speakers from Asia, America, and Europe. We simply said we have speakers coming from all over the world to share their experience with us. The next slide, please. We have up to 500 or 600 registered to this conference, and you would see that the majority of the participants came from West Africa, but again, we have a lot of participants coming from other regions of the continent. So this chart simply shows you the diversity in terms of the regions on the continent and outside the continent from where we got our participants. Next slide, please. Also, we have a diversity in terms of institutional representations, either from the development agency, the government agency, the international institutions, the NGOs, the private sector, the regional institutions, UN agency, university, and research knowledge centers, and the media. You can also see from the chart where we had our participants coming from in terms of institutions. Next slide, please. Here, we try to analyze how our participant, or the participant to this meeting, how did they got the information about this consultation. And you would see here, we have done a quick analysis, and most of the participants were invited, but almost half of the participants got the information from various sources, either through Google search, newsletters, websites, social media, mouth to mouth. So you can see that it's really 50-50 from invitations and 50 coming from other sources. So they heard about the information from their own search. The next slide, please. Here is another pictogram showing why did people decide to participate. Why did people decide to participate? And you would see that the majority, almost 75%, came here because of the professional motivations. They did not just come here because they want to attend a conference, but they are here because they want to learn and go back and apply, because this is in line with what they do every day, and they really want to see how the lessons that they will get from this consultation could help the work that they will be doing when they are back in their various institutions. The next slide, please. Now, we try to look at the people who register for the consultations, and if you recall, we had some questions when you were registering, your areas of interest. What do you expect at the end of the consultation? And you will see that the first diagram shows you the number of people who came to access additional knowledge and best practices on what is going on at national level. The second shows you the number of people who came here because they wanted to learn about have a better understanding on the food fortification programs and strategy. The third one wanted really to learn about effective management of the food fortification program. And the fourth one, and this is quite interesting to see that a lot of people came here because they wanted at the end of this consultation to formulate concrete recommendations to government and to other stakeholders. So you can see, and I hope from the conclusion made by Dr. Hamid that we all have gotten what we came here or what we ought to gain from this meeting. The next. And this is a slide just showing the thematic areas of interest, and you would see it was quite equal, but the majority really wanted to understand, to know more about the mapping, the trend, and the challenges and opportunities on food fortification on the continent. If not, all the participants have the same interest on all the subjects that were discussed during the last 2 days. I think this is the last slide. And with this, I want us to move to the last session, which is the closing session. And before I call on our guest of honor, who will provide the final remark, I would like to invite the acting director of CEFRAM, Mr. Patrick Tejera, to give us some final word before the meeting is closed. Patrick, you have the floor. Patrick, your mic is closed. Your mic is closed. Can you open? You are muted. Patrick, votre micro. Est-ce que vous pouvez ouvrir le micro? On ne vous écoute pas.
Sorry, Dr. Simplice, just 1 minute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Simplice, for doing an amazing job of taking us through this journey. It's been a journey for us from the start. We did believe in this high-level consultation. After 2 days, we feel like the organizers of this consultation, you name them, the government of Côte d'Ivoire, the World Food Programme, and very importantly, the African Union Commission, through its diverse divisions, but also the West African Health Organization, did a good job in bringing together these high-level consultations. So I feel reassured that food fortification is on the right track, and we look forward as organizer to being of help in really pushing this important agenda forward. With this word, Dr. Simplice, I would like to pass the floor back to you so we can have the official closing remarks by our distinguished guest, Honorable Minister of Health of the Government of Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you very much all.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, comme il est de coutume à la fin d'un atelier ou d'une consultation de haut niveau comme celui-ci, nous devons suivre un discours de clôture et ce discours de clôture sera prononcé par le ministre de la Santé de la Côte d'Ivoire qui nous a fait l'honneur de nous rejoindre à ce moment. Excellences, Monsieur le ministre, vous avez la parole.
Merci. Monsieur le directeur régional de l'Afrique de l'Ouest du Centre du Programme alimentaire mondial, Son Excellence Madame l'ambassadeur commissaire de l'Union africaine chargée de l'agriculture, du développement rural, de l'économie bleue et de l'environnement durable, Monsieur le Président de l'Union interparlementaire, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des organisations internationales et nationales, partenaires de la lutte contre la malnutrition, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais remercier tous les participants, l'ensemble des partenaires engagés dans la lutte contre la malnutrition pour les échanges riches et ouverts que nous avons eus pendant ces 2 jours de concertation. La participation des experts de haut niveau nous a permis d'apprécier l'état des lieux et de l'enrichissement des aliments en Afrique et de réaffirmer les initiatives pour accéder à la lutte contre les carences en micronutriments. Les discussions et échanges ont été fructueux, montrant les étapes que nous avons déjà franchies et partager les efforts à fournir pour parfaire la stratégie d'enrichissement des aliments en Afrique si nous voulons réduire les principales carences identifiées. Mesdames et Messieurs, nos États se sont engagés, conformément aux orientations continentales et sous-régionales, pour une nutrition optimale et saine des populations. Nous nous félicitons des progrès accomplis, mais les résultats sont différents selon les pays et les défis persistent pour lutter efficacement et durablement contre les carences en micronutriments. Ces 2 jours de réflexion nous ont permis d'apprécier la situation des carences dans nos pays respectifs et partager plusieurs expériences et bonnes pratiques, y compris avec le Brésil, l'Inde et la Chine. Les leçons apprises et résultats obtenus nous permettent de nous projeter pour identifier des interventions pour une lutte efficace. À cet effet, une nouvelle initiative voit le jour, à savoir l'intégration d'autres véhicules de grande consommation pour son enrichissement en micronutriments. Les experts ont identifié le riz, dont le processus d'enrichissement a fait l'objet d'échanges riches en enseignements et innovations prometteuses. Ce choix nécessitera l'engagement de l'ensemble des parties prenantes dans le secteur privé, les organisations de la société civile et les partenaires techniques et financiers. Mesdames et messieurs, nous devons vous féliciter pour de notre détermination donc, contre les carences en micronutriments à travers des politiques et directives adaptées pour l'enrichissement des aliments. Je salue les conclusions, notamment les recommandations issues de ces réflexions. Elles doivent être partagées dans nos différents États qui doivent les adopter et la Côte d'Ivoire endosse la responsabilité donc, de ces engagements, mais surtout travaillera à faire aboutir les différentes recommandations à l'intérieur donc, de la discussion et des dialogues nécessaires au sein du gouvernement. Elle doit faire l'objet d'une diffusion plus large pour une appropriation régionale et continentale, pour une réglementation plus forte et plus efficace des marchés. Les mesures fortes du communiqué final devront guider nos actions futures dans un cadre d'action pertinente. Au terme de mes propos, je adresse mes félicitations et remerciements à la Commission africaine pour l'agriculture, le développement rural, l'économie bleue et l'environnement durable, à l'Organisation ouest-africaine de la santé ainsi qu'au Programme alimentaire mondial pour l'organisation des présentes assises aux côtés de la Côte d'Ivoire. Mes remerciements vont également à l'endroit des pays participants et à l'ensemble des experts. Finalement, mes remerciements vont aux femmes pour l'organisation de la coordination des échanges. C'est sur ces mots que je déclare clos la consultation de haut niveau sur l'enrichissement des aliments. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, pour ces mots de clôture et surtout cet engagement que la Côte d'Ivoire prend à appuyer, à mettre en œuvre les recommandations de cet atelier et nous espérons que les autres États membres suivront l'exemple de la Côte d'Ivoire. Merci encore, Monsieur le Ministre. Je voudrais, avant qu'on se quitte, remercier les gens qui ont facilité la communication. Nous avons utilisé au cours de cette consultation plusieurs langues, bien que nous avions l'impression que nous parlions tous français ou anglais, mais il y avait du français mélangé au bambara ou de l'anglais mélangé au kiswahili. Et s'il n'y avait pas ces interprètes, je pense qu'on n'aurait pas pu communiquer. Je voudrais remercier sincèrement, au nom de l'équipe d'organisation, les interprètes qui ont facilité la communication durant cette consultation. Je voudrais remercier toute l'équipe derrière, l'équipe technique, qui a facilité la préparation et la tenue de cet atelier. Je voudrais remercier tout le monde et vous dire, on se revoit d'ici peu pour le point et pour les autres activités qui seront organisées conjointement, et encore, et je le pense, par la Côte d'Ivoire, le CERFAM, la Commission de l'Union africaine, l'Organisation régionale de la santé pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest et d'autres partenaires pour pouvoir promouvoir la fortification des aliments sur le continent. Merci beaucoup, bon après-midi et à très bientôt. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup.
fortification, the process of adding vitamins and minerals to commonly eaten food, can help end micronutrient malnutrition. Looking back over the past century, fortification has already resulted in remarkable improvements in health and nutrition. It is critical we take this further. In the early 1900s, scientists discovered that many devastating health conditions were the direct result of eating too few vitamins and minerals. So countries in Europe and North America began adding micronutrients to foods like salt, milk, and margarine. And as a result, these conditions virtually disappeared. In the 1940s, countries in North America began adding iron and B vitamins to maize and wheat flour, which was promoted to keep soldiers healthy during World War II. Starting in the 1960s and 70s, countries in Latin America began fortifying foods like corn and sugar, helping reduce levels of anemia and vitamin A deficiencies. In the 1990s, salt iodization was scaled up all around the world, helping the number of countries with iodine deficiencies to tumble from 110 in 1993 to 25 by 2015. In 1996, Oman was among the first countries to fortify wheat flour with folic acid, and birth defects like spina bifida plunged. By the 2000s, leading economists were ranking food fortification among the top development priorities, given its huge impact at a low cost. But until recently, one important grain has largely been left out of global fortification efforts: rice. It's a staple for half the world's population, and new technology now means it can be fortified at a large scale. Since 2001, Costa Rica has fortified all of its rice, along with other foods. And the cost? Fortifying rice added just 1 cent to the price of a kilo bag.
Bueno, podría decirles que ha sido una experiencia muy exitosa aquí en este país.
La espina bífida en un 60%. También la anemia en mujeres en edad fértil se ha reducido bastante, de un 18% hacia un 13%.
We have about 500 million women in the world who are still affected by anemia, and about half of them can improve their conditions by having more iron. And that is what fortification can do.
Since 2011, Bangladesh has been distributing fortified rice as part of government safety net programs, in collaboration with the World Food Programme.
এবং WFP আমাদেরকে যে সহায়তাগুলো দিচ্ছে, যে মিলের মধ্যে যে কিভাবে পুষ্টি চাল এবং আমাদের যে স্বাভাবিক যে চাল আছে তার মধ্যে যে রেশিওটা এটাকে কিভাবে মিশিয়ে করবে সেই বিষয়টিতে আমাদেরকে WFP সহায়তা করছেন। বর্তমানে 20টি উপজেলার মধ্যে 41,500 জন সুবিধাভোগীকে আমরা এই পুষ্টি চাল বিতরণ করছি এবং খুব শীঘ্রই আমরা আরো 3টি উপজেলায়।
In Indian states like Odisha, school meal programs have piloted the use of rice fortified with iron, causing significant declines in anemia.
ଆମ ଗଜପତି ଜିଲ୍ଲାରେ 2013 ମସିହାରୁ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ସୁଦ୍ଧା ମଧ୍ୟାହ୍ନ ଭୋଜନ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକ୍ରମରେ ଏହି ଚାଉଳ ଦେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ପିଲାମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ରକ୍ତହୀନତାର ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ଦେଖାଯାଏ ନାହିଁ।
And rice fortification is beginning to crop up in West Africa.
We hope to launch our first flagship product in January. Based on our market trial and our surveys, there definitely is a market there. If you weren't told it was fortified, you wouldn't know it was fortified.
Rice fortification will have the biggest impact where rice is popular, and a growing list of countries are now eating rice as a staple all around the world. These are places where micronutrient malnutrition is often most severe, and where rice fortification can fill an important gap. As the world continues to urbanize, industrialize, and commercialize, fortified rice has the potential to reach more people and improve more lives.
People who used to buy or live off the land, now they buy food from market distribution channels, even in rural parts of Africa. And today rice is being adopted in those parts of the world where you want fortification. So we, as Olam, we believe that it's the right time, it's the right place, as well as the right staple to go for.
Food fortification has had a tremendous impact, but there's still a lot more that we can do.
There is no such thing as a magic bullet, one solution to solve the malnutrition problem. Large-scale food fortification can provide a part of the solution.
The necessary condition is to have a common will between the governments, the non-governmental sector, and the private sector. It has to be a coordinated effort.
So if we do all those things and we're all working in synergy, then very quickly we can see results.
"2021 represents a pivotal year to invigorate interest, awareness and investment in large-scale food fortification and biofortification. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres will convene a food systems summit as part of the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And today we're taking a deep dive focusing on the complementarity between large-scale food fortification and biofortification, and the opportunities of ensuring the most vulnerable people are reached with nutrient-rich foods. What would you say the impact of COVID-19 has been on global malnutrition?
The impacts of COVID, turning the clock back 10 years. So 10 years of progress is being wiped out if we don't act.
Before the pandemic, 2 billion people were suffering from malnutrition, not a small number. Now World Food Program, for example, estimates that people who are facing food security is going to double 2020.
Lots of people have heard of fortification, but they probably haven't heard of industrial fortification or biofortification. So can you break those terms down, explain what the difference is between them and how they complement each other?
Industrial fortification is the addition of a
2021 represents a pivotal year to invigorate interest, awareness and investment in large-scale food fortification and biofortification. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres will convene a food systems summit as part of the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals